do, and we've seen probably in the past some URLs that retrieve some data. Now, most of the time when we use a URL in our URL bar in Google Chrome, we're actually requesting a web page. But in this case, we're just trying to request some data, usually represented in JSON, that we can then access in our application. Well, now that we know about that whole process, it can be really helpful to use a tool like Postman to enable us to make requests and save them, and then get back responses from the internet without having to really write any code in our application. So this way, we can go make requests, figure out what the actual response to that request is going to be, and then figure out how to deal with it in our app. So not having to write code before we figure this stuff out is a really important part of the planning process. It can really speed up the development process in general. We can also test out our own servers and APIs to see if they're working properly, and it's a really useful tool for us. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to demo to you a little bit about some of the features of Postman and show you around a little bit, and then let you free. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. What you can see is the Star Wars API up on the left. This is an API that lets us access information about Star Wars characters and planets and ships and things like that. It's a free API on the internet. It's intended for people to be able to learn how to use an API. And on the right, I have the Postman app. You'll want to make sure you download the Postman application. It can be pretty unuseful just using the client that they have in the web. So go ahead and download the application, and you'll want to make a new request. So right now I have some workspaces in here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new workspace for the Star Wars API. Create a workspace. And here I have the Star Wars API. And then on the top left, I can make new requests. I can even make new collections and environments. There's lots of stuff we can do with Postman. It's a pretty useful and valuable tool. But all I'm going to do for now is just use this open tab right here, or actually I'll just make a new tab, and I'll make a new request. This request, let's go ahead and call it person one or people one. It doesn't matter what the name is. We can make a collection if we want to, like people, but it's not necessary. Collection is just a way for us to take all of our requests that we end up saving and organize them a little bit. So, okay, I believe this should be good, although we may not be allowed to do. Okay, here we go. Now we are able to work on this. So people one here, and this is going to be saved into the people collection. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And we can see this is the name of our request. It's open in a tab. And right here in the section where we're allowed to type stuff in, this is basically the same as typing something into your URL bar. And we can pick any of the HTTP request methods that are available. So right now we just care about get, because really we want to get information from a server. In the future, we'll want to do post requests that's sending information to a server. Put and patch requests are intended to update information on a server, and delete requests are pretty straightforward. The rest of these you don't deal with nearly as often. So these are really the 5 most common types of requests. And really for now, we only really care about get requests. So let's go ahead and type into our URL bar here, HTTP. So you need this full URL, starwarsapi.co/API/people/1, and let's send this request. This is going to actually send a request to the Star Wars API out on the internet, and we're going to get the JSON response back. So we can see that this API is just sending us back a JavaScript object in JavaScript object notation. So this is a little bit different than just a normal JavaScript object, right? We can see that everything has double quotes around it, even the key names. And we can see that pretty much everything is a string. JSON really only supports strings and numbers and some primitive types like Booleans, and then anything else kind of has to be inferred. You can see that there's also arrays, nested arrays, and you can even have nested objects. But basically, you can think of this as a JavaScript object. And when we're working in JavaScript, when we're working in Vue, we can pull out all of the information from this just like we would a normal JavaScript object. So that's called JavaScript object notation, that response type. And this is our request. If I want to, I can totally save this request, but I can also modify the request. So we can see that if I change this to 2, it changes the actual person that we're finding. If I just do people, we can see here's a list of many people instead of just one person. So this is a way for us to test and figure out how an API actually works and see how all of this stuff comes back to us before we write any code.